Testing.
Today is Monday, April 3rd, 2023. We are at the Green Ladle and we'll call this meeting to order at 5:35 p.m. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Should I wait? Okay. We will move forward with the school committee member introductions and we'll start with the city council representative.
Linda Scott, Lewiston City Council Rep.
Paul Bopelant representing Ward 7.
Megan Hurd, Ward 6.
Tanya Whitlow, Ward 4.
Elizabeth Eames, Ward 3.
Janet Bowden, Ward 2.
Bruce Damon, Ward 1.
Megan Parks at large.
Jake Langley, Superintendent.
And our Ward 5 rep is absent excused tonight. Agenda item number 3 is the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that members would like set aside? Seeing none, the consent agenda is approved. Item number 4 is public input. Members of the public may address the school committee for up to 3 minutes on non-agenda items now and on agenda items later. Comments that pertain to staff, personnel matters, or a student issue should be directed to the superintendent or the appropriate staff member of Lewiston Public Schools. Public comments shall be directed to the school committee and be brief, not repetitive, and related to the matter at hand. Before starting, please state your name, address, and affiliation to Lewiston Public Schools. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak on non-agenda items? Seeing none, we will move on to item number 5, which is to recognize Lewiston Public Schools students.
So I'm looking out into the crowd and I'm not seeing the list of students that we had. So I know that there was a scheduling challenge last time and we rebooked for today, but I'm not sure we're there.
We can move forward, and if they happen to show up, we'll backtrack. Agenda item number 6 is to receive and potentially vote on a field trip request to West Springfield, Massachusetts. And that will be presented by somebody in the audience.
It's
Alan Graves.
Graves and Kathy County. And as they come up to share their request for a field trip, want to add some duplication to it. They received word, my understanding is essentially overnight, that they've qualified for competitions that are this week. And there are associated costs. So in your packet, there is a breakdown of some costs. And I'm sure they're going to speak to it, but on the agenda itself, the committee may want to consider, an approval of funds being requested for this regional competition. But again, their time frame was literally last night. And so I'll kind of pass the mic over to you.
Hi, Alan Graves, LRTC trades instructor. We're requesting that our first robotics team gets to go to West Springfield, Mass to compete in the district's, is it regional or district?
It's New England District Championship.
New England District Championship. We've qualified for this. I like to look at it as the playoffs part of our season. As superintendent has said, it does come with quite a bit of cost. They request a $4,000 registration fee. And that was due today at 5 o'clock. They don't give you a lot of time for that.
We
And you don't
literally
find out
got
until,
the email this morning. We knew when we looked at the rankings yesterday, but it was not an official invite until today with a deadline of today to pay.
correct. And with that comes added expenses of travel, lodging, food. And we have worked pretty hard, I would say, in the last 2 weeks, raising money, knocking on doors, going in businesses, showing our faces. With, I like to think quite a bit of luck, but I think the amount needed to make this a success for us to go down there is a hard reach for a week and a half. We've collected just over $5,000 in a week from local businesses. We have a lot more out there of promises. I'm just not receiving it yet. But the registration fee is $4,000. Lodgings approximately $2,000. Food, you're looking probably about $1,000. We have a current balance from the last competition of $3,500, and the regular season just to compete is $6,000. And this being our first year without grants, it's a really hard thing to do with our group of kids. And I think we're on the right pace. We got a fairly good sized team. And we have a lot out there right now. We're not stopping, requesting for sponsorships. But I think the time frame is just really, really hard to meet for us. We're being a new team.
Ms. Whitlow, Member Whitlow.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's great news. So what's the amount that you're asking for?
With all our back fees, it's approximately $11,000.
Member Whitlow.
If I can follow up. So part of the money that you raised over the last week and a half or so, did that go towards registering, or you're using part of that for this specific competition?
Correct.
Right?
It's everything's in a pot and we're throwing as much as we can at it.
Member Scott.
Thank you. Well, first off, congratulations. Fantastic job. So I guess a couple of questions for you. After this competition, is there another competition?
There's Worlds in Houston, Texas. And once again, they're very good with their timelines. And it's literally you go there on Saturday, the competition's done, and Saturday they say, are you going or not, and load up your robot. So that's another quick turnaround.
And are you going to need funds for that trip as well, probably? Yeah.
If we qualify, yeah.
If you qualify. So are you going to continue raising funds up until, even though I
Correct.
see Ahmed nodding his head
correct.
back there?
Correct.
We
We-
essentially told the team we're not stopping.
Right.
And we're learning too, in this process. It's really only our first, our second full year. And so as mentors, we're learning. So what I said to them over the last week and a half is we are not stopping because we need to get through this year and already have money going toward next year. And they've done an amazing job in the last, 6 school days.
And can I ask one more question, please? Do you have new students this year on top of what you had last year?
Yes.
Yes,
many
we have,
more?
we've more than doubled our team size. I think that's why we've done so well. We seem to attract really forward thinkers. They're very good at problem solving, very relentless on making sure the job gets done and it's done to the best of our ability. So I think it's a testament to the kids, how far we've gone and how well we've done with literally no money, literally just begging and pleading and showing, that you don't need deep pockets to be competitive.
So I'd like to make a suggestion, 2 years. 2 years winning competitions, 2 years doubling the team size in 2 years. Honest to God, this is like one of those things that if we don't support, we're kind of foolish not to. I understand that we're in a tight budget season, but this is something great for our school. It's great for the future of our school. It's great for these kids, and I would like to see this grow. So I would like to make a suggestion to the committee that we support this as best as we can. I don't know the specific amount. I'd like to hear from everybody else, but as much as we can, I would like to support them.
Member Bowden?
Thank you. Congratulations, guys.
Thank you.
Do you have any idea what the next cost might be moving forward if you were to get beyond this competition?
For Worlds,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't calculate out what the airfares are starting today. And we have, go ahead.
So if you asked me a week ago, I would have said, there's no way we're gonna qualify to go to, like, we're just not ready.
You did say. that.
Yep, that's, we're a little behind on the 8 ball. We weren't really expecting to be as good as we are, as much of a powerhouse. I mean, we really kicked some butt, last competition. So, I mean, airfare for, you're looking probably 12 kids to Houston. I'm not sure what the airfare to Houston is at this time of the year, but it's during April break, so I'm sure it's gonna be pretty high.
It means they won't miss classes.
Hotels, food, once again, they pay to ship your robot, but they don't pay to ship your tools. And then I would be very surprised if there wasn't another registration fee
There is.
attached to this. So
I can't remember what it is.
I believe it's 4,000 to 6,000.
That's what I thought too, somewhere at least 4, maybe I don't think it's as much as 6, but it's at least 4.
That's
So
what we paid for districts.
it's a lot of money. But you know, I'm in agreement with member Scott, and you know, when we have students from Lewiston who are doing like such great things and can go on to a national level and represent us, and you know, that's nothing but good stuff. And I don't see how we don't support something like that. It's steep, but I think it's a great return on our investment. So I would be in support of this.
Member Scott?
Sorry, Member Ames, I saw your hand go at the same time. So I'm going to put this out there to the community and community leaders that I see in the room, newspaper, we've got a TV station here. Lewiston Robotics team needs our support. I'm going to ask the mayor to please get out there. He's great on social media. Honestly, let's get everybody supporting this team and do what we can. If they can make it to nationals, we as a community need to support them and do everything we can to get them there.
Thank you. And I did bring with me some of the letters we're sending out, the sponsorship letters, along with what we call the sponsorship. Oh my gosh, I just went. What's the name of that budget thing?
Degrees of sponsorship.
The degrees, I'm sorry, degrees of sponsorship, in case anybody wanted to take them and hand them out, which is what we've been doing with students and talking about who we are and what we are capable of doing. Actually, we didn't know how capable we were. Last time we came and spoke with you, we were really hoping to win that next or do well in the next competition, and we did. We did. Oh, we were joking. We almost did too well because we wanted to be chosen as at least a 3rd robot. We ended up being a captain of an alliance. We ended up being the 5th out of 8 alliance captains, which meant that we were 5th. Choosing alliances to join us. 40 teams were there. We ranked 7th and then moved up. And overall, New England has 270 teams or so, and we are ranked 50 right now in New England. But part of the rankings come from the points you get during a competition and the teams you're allied with. And when we were aligned with the teams that are what we consider maybe the high functioning teams, we're right up there with them. And I'm not supposed to be surprised. We have an amazing group of kids, and I think almost every one of them is top of their class. And I think surprised because we're so new and we're doing so well. And it just feels really good, the accomplishments that these guys, and not only are we a new team, we have new Americans on our team. We're just really proud of what we've done and what they've done to join us and grow this team. So thank you.
Can you share what you guys are doing for fundraising so people in the community can know how to donate? Do you have a GoFundMe or anything like that so community can
Well, I've
contribute?
tried to get I'm working on getting clarification on what that means because I thought that I saw an email that said we're not allowed to do GoFundMe's, but some other clubs have done something with Facebook fundraisers. So I did put out an email on Friday and got a response. Oh my gosh, who is it? I don't know. Bill, you can help me. Who did I say?
Adam.
Thank you, Adam. And I was gonna follow up with you today to find out, get clarity on what we can and cannot do. I wasn't about to do something without permission. And then otherwise, we're making phone calls and sending emails. We started with people that we know in the community, like the herds at Chickadee. We don't have money from them yet, but they promised it. We've gone to essentially Hammond Lumber, Maine Family Credit Union, Marco's, a number of different businesses, and we're reaching beyond the known to go to more of the unknown. And we've done pretty well in a week, 6 school days.
If someone in the community wanted to make a donation, would they just reach out to you directly or?
So right now on the, yes, yeah, either Alan A. Graves at Lewis Public Schools or K County at, checks can be made out to LRTC 8023 robotics. And we put that into our activities fund, and that's what we have for now.
I was just going to add that I know that there's some students here, if they didn't want to share a little bit about their experience or their aspirations to attend the regional event.
Right. Well, first of all, my name is Ahmad. I'm the team's programmer. We came here at the beginning of the season. Honestly, I was not expecting that we're gonna do that good. Like there were teams, they're sponsored by like big companies such as Apple, Microsoft, Google, like big, heavy tech companies. And we competed against them and we won them, which is very impressive. Our code worked consistently. Our robot is like one of the best robots right now, even though it's very tiny. The commentators usually call it the small robot that can, because like it's a small robot and it basically can beat anyone.
Little robot that could.
All right, the little robot that could. And yeah, robotics have added a lot to my life. I just feel like one of the main reasons I speak English the way I speak right now is because of robotics team. The team has grown inside me. It's more like a family right now. Like I can tell them if there's something emotionally that's hurting me, or like if there's something or if there's someone that I need to talk to, it's usually Mr. Graves or like someone from the robotics team. Yeah. So, and here are some other members I can talk.
A side note, Ahmed, our program is perfect. That's what we tell everybody. It's 100%. And he's programmed that. And he's also our top recruiter. Anybody he sees or anybody that he thinks might have $1 in their pocket, he says, "Hey, we're on the robotics team. You want to donate or do you want to come join us?"
Hello, my name is Hamdi Mohammed. I'm a freshman, and robotics team has given me a lot of opportunities. I first came to America a bit ago, 2011, and since then, there has not been a lot of STEM opportunities across the grades. But once I saw that there was a robotics team here at the high school, I just jumped at the opportunity, and it's been great since. I've been able to learn things I would not be able to learn in my normal classes or otherwise. I've been to these big events. I've lost my voice from yelling. Overall, the robotics team experience has been great, and I hope that it can continue to be great across every season and until I go for college. And I hopefully for next teams and teams beyond mine, they'll have enough fundraising. They'll be able to get the backing from the community, and they'll be able to continue and Lewiston will be remembered as an amazing robotics team.
Hi, this is Moises Garcia, and this is a great team. This has so many impact in all my life, not just on robotics, I mean, on my social life, on my knowledge. Now I know how to use the incorrect way, all the tools. And also I'm improving a lot my English here. I'm not from here, I'm from Mexico, and I have just 1 year on here. So they are helping me a lot in all my English, how to use the tools, and all about my school, math, science, and all. So this, I wanna say thank you for that. That's it.
Thank
Just
you.
to
You're
add
all,
what Moises has said,
sorry.
Just to add on what he said, he's actually very detailed. Like, I was in his position last year, like the technician position, which is like responsibility for fixing and checking if the robot is functioning or not for our competition. I didn't really used to check every time if the robot is functioning or not. I used to complain a lot about how heavy our robot was. But Moises is, well, the machine, yeah, exactly.
Member Heard.
Thank you. So first, I'd like to say I am confident that your donation from the chickadee will come through. Also too, are we, so a few things. I think, yes, I am for this. I feel like we've had other clubs and groups come to us and we have approved their requests. So if we're going to approve one, if we can do it logistically, then I think we need to improve all, as it's a great opportunity for our students. And maybe this is more of a question for you, but Jake, would we approve like a set amount, and then if they continue to raise money on their own, say they don't need as much as we said we were going to give, would that roll over to the next if they make it to Worlds?
I guess there's a few ways to do it. I would agree that we've had other groups come in and ask for support for bigger competitions at the next stage, and we've supported that when we can. I do want to say publicly, though, that not every year we are able to do that. Sometimes the budget is just too tight. There's two ways. I think one way is we could work with Director Callahan as the funds make their way to the activity account, the student activity account, and that could either reimburse you all, the school department, if that's what you wish. And they could also bank those funds for a future competition, whether it's this year or even in the future, if those funds are available.
Where would the funds come from?
So they've got a lot of feelers out for funds now, is that what you mean?
I mean, if we approve funds tonight, where is that coming from us?
You would be directing me to go find it. And I mean that sincerely. I think you're talking about, funds that sit in an area of an unfilled position. And so those funds have not been spent. We've been very, very good about that. So I do think there are funds available and we can make that adjustment.
Thank you. Member Bopalant.
Thank you. Can you tell me how much we committed to mock trial?
It was in the mid-teens, I believe. I don't recall the exact number. I can look though.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Member Heard.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to approve their request for the field trip.
Second.
Are we going to do the money separately or what?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any discussion on approving the field trip? All in favor? It's unanimous. Is there a motion regarding the funding?
I'd like to make a motion to approve $11,000 for their field trip.
Member Damon?
I had a question. You said that you would know on Saturday whether you guys were able to move forward to Texas, which
Correct.
would be held the following week.
Yeah, yep, April break. It's a quick turnaround. So the way the competition goes, if you haven't seen it, you have a day of qualifying matches, approximately 12 or so. And that kind of sets where your ranking is. And then there's the playoffs for that tournament. And then where you depend on that, set your ranking within New England. Right now, I believe we're in the 50s. And I think we need to be in the 40, top 60. So we're close. I would say it's very possible for us to do well in this. I don't see it as a long shot. If you asked me last week, I would have said no way, no possible way. But I think we have a very good chance to be in this. I think our robot is very strong. I think our kids are very strong. So I would say we very well could qualify.
That's fine. So in the hopeful event that you do move forward, then this $11,000 request is going to be nowhere near sufficient to send you to Texas.
Correct.
Is that right?
Correct.
And we would not have another meeting prior to them actually going, would we?
We do have something scheduled on Monday, their hearings. We could maybe add if that was needed, unless you want to do something tonight in the just in case.
I think that, to me, I mean, I'd hate to, I'd like to promote this and give them the idea that go for it, let's do it, knowing that at least we would have their back. So I'd like to amend the motion to, authorize the superintendent to try to find $25,000 to send this team to Texas and to Westfield, first, and then to Texas if we can do it.
Member Eames?
So then the question is if they do not go, so this is a contingent, if they get to Worlds then, okay, so as long as it's phrased that way, it's good.
So you made the original motion, Ms. Whitlow? Are you comfortable amending it to the 11,000 for Massachusetts? If they make it to Texas, then we would add the additional 14,000?
Yes, of course.
Is there a second for that motion? Member
I'll
Curran?
second that motion.
Any further discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous. Good luck, everybody.
Wow.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I have a quick question on that. So this also brings up a field trip issue.
Oh, that's right.
So what would be the best way for us to go about this?
I would ask right now.
Okay. Oh, that's what I was hoping. I just wrote a note to him. So I will fill out the paperwork for the request tomorrow, but can we ask that we get approval for that field trip?
So they'd be asking for overnight travel by plane to Houston for competition and back. Lodging, meals.
The same safety concerns that were on, well, except for air travel, but
The flight, the change of date, and a change of venue.
And what are the chaperone requirements?
There'd be a 10-to-1 ratio.
Okay, so that sounds like you're covered.
did we have 3 here? And my other son Jacob has already paid for his tickets. He was going no matter what with the other team. So we have 4, and I don't know about Jeremy, if he could go,
We have another mentor. It would be up to his work schedule if he could go.
and maybe his wife.
Okay. Maybe.
I like to travel.
Is there a motion to approve their field trip to Texas if needed?
Yes, so moved. I'll make the motion to approve the field trip to Texas if they make it beyond next weekend.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Oh my
That is also unanimous.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
very much.
Thank
Did you catch who motion seconded? Your motion.
Linda, second. The last motion? Yeah, Linda. Agenda item number 7 is to receive and potentially vote on a field trip request to Southern Maine Community College, and Mr. Callahan will present.
I've instructed Director Callahan to ask for less money on this presentation.
Thomas. I am here tonight and I am pleased to seek permission on behalf of our hospitality program. They have had a wonderful invitation from the SMCC hospitality program to be part of the, I'm not familiar with the Spruce Point Inn, which is part of the SMC campus, part of the hospitality program. And in this request, our students would travel on a Monday, I believe it's the 24th, be part of some of the classwork that students are doing, so they get to experience that college coursework, and then be part of the inn itself, not only to stay there, but to see the operations firsthand, to be able to shadow some of their students and understand really what the experience is all about. Meet with the staff, actually hear them interacting with guests. So it's been something that we've done in the past and been very, very popular with students. They've come away from it with a very good understanding of what the hospitality industry has to offer and requires of them. So again, this is a request based on that experience. They've been wonderful partners at SM with us, so we're pleased to offer that again. I would add that the students in the hospitality program have worked hard in hosting the restaurant days that I know some of you have been able to attend. And so that the cost of it's about a $50 cost per student. And that's been defrayed by the money they've earned in donations and so forth to the activity fund for the culinary arts program. So I'm pleased to submit that, and I'd welcome your questions.
Member Hurd.
Thank you. I have no questions. I'd just like to make a motion to approve this field trip.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Member Whitlow?
Are you asking for any funds for it?
None.
Oh, perfect.
Did you have a question also?
Yeah, just a logistics question. It's April vacation, correct, when you go?
It's the Monday, Tuesday after. I'm pretty sure we start the vacation on the 17th.
Oh, okay.
So I think this is the following week, the 24th and 25th.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
I'm not sure if that's correct in the form, but it should read 24, 25
It does,
April.
yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? All in favor? It's unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Callahan. Agenda item number 8 is to receive and potentially vote on the 23-24 school calendar.
So we've worked closely with our region because our calendar has to align to our region, representing all the schools that attend the technical center. There's some state statute around that. We've also worked with the LEA and gotten feedback from community about the calendar days and some adjustments. We did some things this year to kind of get a day back before June, and we had some feedback on that. So this proposed calendar reflects that, and we just open any questions you may have and go from there.
Member Hurd.
Thank you. I had talked to Jake about this previously. So I thought I would share it all with you. Just some talks about taking February break and April break and making just one spring break. So like in just March. As we tend to have a lot of snow days in February anyway, so lots of snow days plus a break. It's just a lot of times for students to be out. So I would love to hear obviously we're not doing it this year as we have other districts that we have to worry about, but anybody's like input, or Jake, I know you said you were going to talk to other superintendents.
Yeah, I'm definitely open to further feedback from any of you, but when Member Hurd and I were talking about it, the idea actually intrigues me, but it's hard to shift such a large system. And so this would require the agreement essentially of Lisbon, Oak Hill, Poland, Levitt, and Auburn. In addition, if we swap those days, because we have a 5-day dissimilar limitation in our calendar to receive our state subsidy. And so if we did something like that on our own, it would put us 10 days dissimilar, or 8 actually, because those both start with holidays, but and that's before other schools have a dissimilar. So that becomes the barrier when we want to do kind of big calendar shifts. To be honest, though, I like the idea, but we'd have to do some legwork to get the whole area to do it.
Member Whitlow.
Thank you for the thought on that. I would have to say I'm not a fan of it. And the reason for that, February in Maine is is a really tough time, wet depression. The weather is awful, it's cold. A lot of people like to get away, or take a break. And I think mental health is a thing to think about when it comes to that. So that's just my thought there.
Member Eames?
Two things. One, I'm thinking about, is it 2 10-day or maybe a total of 8 days and 1 month? Was that the plan? Megan?
Oh, what she was proposing is, there's some place in the country that they do the March spring break.
Yeah,
and
but is it
not-
2 weeks worth or 1 week worth?
Oh, I
And if
see what
it's
you're
1
asking.
week worth, then we're losing days of break. So,
Right, and
so that's one of my questions.
I don't know that we carved out all that detail. It's more of a pondering
So that
of
would be
what if.
something to think about.
Yeah, for sure.
And then my other thing is just about the punctuation of the breaks. And if it's no break until March, that's a long time to go. And no break in May. So it would be nice to have two. I think it's nice to have 2 breaks. On the other hand, March is really hard here. And so having a break in March does appeal to me in principle. So how to work it out, obviously, it's a big ask, but sorry to bring this up again, but Bates just moved to a new calendar and they decided to do two breaks. One in February and one in March, just to give, a punctuated set of breaks. And it was a big change. It took a lot of working out, and I think people still aren't really used to it yet. So just think about that. But I think punctuating is more important than one big one.
Member Damon?
If we were able to move to a single week in March, how would that affect the overall calendar? Would we be able to push the start of school till after Labor Day and we'd still be out in the early June? Assuming that, because we still have 175 days required and we still have 182 days for staff under contract, right? So there would it just move it a little bit in between if we drop the extra 5 days out of there?
Yeah, I think because I have the blessing and the curse of living the snow days, I'm always thinking of June. But I think if the region really did want to consider something like this, I think there'd be the potential for something on either end. I think it's a whole lot could come out of a discussion if it gets any traction. I think it could go either way.
Member Bowden?
Thank you. So aside from the contractual obligations that we have with our teachers and staff, I'm a basketball family, and February break is the championships. That is the MPA's week for high school basketball championships. So I have a hard time wrapping my head around where they would squeeze all of those games in if they didn't have February break. So I would not support that. But I do think it's creative and I like where you're going with it, but I don't think I could support that.
Member Hurd?
So yeah, it was just a discussion we were having. I've heard from a lot of teachers that March is a never ending month. It's a very, very long month. And I know we're always trying to get our students out as early as we possibly can in June, as there's probably not a whole lot of learning that goes on in June. The weather's warm and those types of things. So it was just kind of like an out of the box thing that I brought to Jake. I know a lot of states like down south, they don't do 2 breaks. They just do a spring break. So it was just kind of like a thought, and I wanted to get everybody's input.
Just one thing that I think is a typo on here for the March teacher exchange day. It says makeup decision made by 1/31 of 23. Should that be 1/31 of 24?
Yes, I'll make a note of that.
Member Eames?
On that line, there's the 31st of January is missing on the side in the margin.
Yes, there's an updated version. My apologies.
And just at looking at it, I have a child graduating next year, so seeing graduation is in May, not June. Is that typical? Is it just how it falls this year?
I think that's how it falls by day count. But I can double check.
And it is a leap year. I just noticed that. Are there any further questions or comments? Would somebody like to make a motion?
Make a motion to accept the calendar as presented.
Member Bopla,
Second that motion.
any further discussion? All in favor? It is unanimous. Agenda item number 9, to receive and potentially vote on the LPS mission, vision, and strategic priorities. Member Eames?
Thanks for all the hard work that went into this. And I basically approve of everything that's here. I do have one question. There's a shift in 2 places where it's not just about students, but it's also about educators and teachers. And I assume that was considered. But I just wanted to hear a little bit about the decision to put under instruction and under pathways, educators show up and not just students. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a very deliberate piece of work, and we had a lot of feedback from our work community, but also our community as a whole, and really talking about those pathways in the instruction and how the responsibility to grow and develop and maintain practices in a modern way was not just the responsibility of students, but also the responsibility of those educating them. So we were deliberate in those. Also, we'll be looking, in the future, if supported, of how we can use this as an anchor for our decision making and, building off of things for funding models and things like that, if approved. So I shared it up so that folks at home, if they want to see that, they can. And the design of this, which you've had before you prior, and this went back out to the community by survey, and feedback was positive, was really to get away from a mission, vision, and 100 goals to go into a mission and a vision and some strategic priorities. So we're not locked into trying to measure a million things that we'll never get to if they're just so big. And so that was a shift in our approach, which I think was appreciated by many people. And really a lot of good work went into this. The amount of feedback before, during, and after has been a really productive process.
Having seen the previous pages and pages of goals, I appreciate this simplified format. It's a lot more digestible, and I think it'll be easier to implement than what we previously have had. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or a motion? Member, Counselor Scott?
I'd like to make a motion to receive and approve the fiscal, the Lewiston Public Schools mission, vision, and strategic priorities.
Thank you. Member Bopla?
I'd like to second the motion.
Any other questions or comments? Member Whitlow?
Yeah, it looks really good. I was just trying to read under the instruction. It just didn't read right to me, and maybe it's a comma, or maybe I'm just not reading it the way it's intended. It says the second sentence, developing and maintaining systems for cultivating new educators provides stability in teaching and learning. Does that read right?
It makes sense to me. What is there a part of it that doesn't make sense to you?
The word provide, developing and maintaining systems for cultivating new educators provides. Educators and provides. Is there supposed to be a comma there? It doesn't, to me, it doesn't read right. Does that sound good?
Developing and maintaining the systems provides the stability in teaching and learning. That's what it's saying. If you make it less wordy.
Okay, as long as it's right. It just doesn't read right to me. So that's fine. That's all.
Okay, Member Bopla?
It's grammatically correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All in favor? It's unanimous. Agenda item number 10 is to receive and potentially vote on the fiscal year 24 budget.
So I have a couple of things to pass out. I have a memo per usual that I will share and then go through. I also have some items from Aisha Hall, who shared some information with some school committee members who were asking about it. She wrote a letter, and there's some other items that she's been working on. So just wanted to share those with you also. It's just part of all the work that's happening. Take one and pass it down.
We're just giving board members a few minutes to digest the information we were just given.
So there's essentially two packets. One has a lot of information about the work around SEL and equity and the various pieces of work that we've done. Aisha Hall put that together for you. And when I say put together, these are living documents that she's working in on a regular basis. I wasn't going to go through those one at a time, but she is here if you have any questions or want to talk about the work of SEL and equity in our district. It's a lot of great work has happened, and I fully support there's a lot of great work that we still need to do. So I'm going to jump into the budget memo. I'll go through this fairly detailed since there may be a vote tonight to approve a proposed budget, but also for the community I know that's listening in. In 8 days, the school committee approved budget hopefully will be presented to the city council. And below is the remaining schedule. And in that remaining schedule I have today, the 11th, when we present to city council, The 24th, we have a regular school committee meeting. We can discuss budget if needed. May 1st, we have a regular meeting and we can discuss budget again if needed. On May 2nd, the city's council is scheduled to vote on the school budget. Between that and the 9th, we'll have a town hall. And then the referendum is on May 9th. Interesting process in a municipal budget piece is that once approved by the school committee, the budget then goes to the city council, which requires their approval, and then goes to referendum. The items that go to the referendum are only school specific, unless there's other items on the referendum, but the city budget does not. So it's kind of a unique piece of the process here in Lewiston as a municipality. So on March 29th last week, school committee voted in support of a budget proposal that included a $1.70 increase in the mill rate on the school part of the budget. We've been conservative with developing next year's budget, and we've cut half the proposed increase from the start of March. As you know, we came in with over $7 million of what we really felt like we needed to do our work well, and we've since reduced that by 3.9 million. That represents $1.77 on the initially proposed mill rate. So essentially, we've cut that in half. Want to just make a quick note that the things that you still see in the budget are things we're very passionate about, obviously, but there's also 61 potential reductions that have been put before you. And we've discussed a lot of things, as you know. We've done some pretty in-depth work since the start of March, actually going back to December with trying to have a direction on what we wanted to do in the budget. And we still have some remaining factors, and some of this might be a repeat for the committee, but it was a busy week last week. We had the state share some subsidy updates due to a duplicative data entry. That piece created a change in our funding by $804,000, and so that was a plus to start the week with from a budgeting perspective. But then we also heard that there was going to be a potential change in language from the way in which we pay tuition to special purpose private schools. And right now we pay per day of attendance, and the projected language was to then make it daily. A lot of superintendents and members of our committee, I know Ms. Eames reached out to a lot of people too to say, hey, time out, we're in the budget process. Have we thought this through? Is this a reality? Very concerning things. And ultimately a decision was decided upon to withdraw that language. And so I think it was Wednesday morning, we were had just this deep sigh of relief because the potential impacts of that was as much as the subsidy change of 800,000 or more. And that doesn't count the 500,000 that we had said we think we can live without in a prior meeting for the tuition. And so what you're going to see before you is a reflection of things that we've put together that are at that rate, some a little above should something happen and we have new funding, and also a conservative approach too. So you've got some options before you. The latest on the special purpose private school language is that we can expect to see it in the next week or two, but that they were making some revisions and they were going to come back. Listening to things through the tea leaves, and I emphasize that. So this is not fact. This is just things that I've heard from people being in Augusta and connected to it. The potential language changes, we're still going to go to an everyday tuition cost. But what they're working on for language was connected to the rate and the control of the rate. So one of the issues I expressed to you last week is we don't set the rate, they do. So if you can have guaranteed payment every day and set the rate, like that's the best hotel plan in the world. And from a public funding perspective, it's not something we can do. And so they're looking at the rate piece and some limitations and constraints there. I don't know what language will come of it, and I don't know when. But as a reminder, this is not a legislative process. This is a rulemaking process. The Department of Education could set forth this rule, and if approved at their level, be in effect potentially immediately. So that could impact the budget this year also for the remainder of the school year. So we still have that anomaly. So what we're trying to do is plan on that being a reality. And if we learn more, certainly we'll share and we'll adjust accordingly. So the options below, they have a number on them, but they're not by priority. we worked really hard to try to put this together and make sure that we're matching up with the will of the committee to have at least that mill rate increase piece captured. While knowing that last week's vote was direction for me to bring you something back and not an approved budget. So with that, I'll go to the first listed option. And it has the inclusion of the additional subsidy, the insurance reduction, because we learned about the cap on the rate. We still don't have the definitive rate, but that should be soon. Tuition rate changes for special purpose private schools, and also added back some student support items. So in that, it was hard to do this from an accounting purpose because I was trying not to get into debits and credits, but I want to note that if you look at additional subsidy in the chart, you see 804,000. And then the change, I put it in brackets, is 804 because what I wanted to take from a budgeting perspective is how that would reduce our liability locally. So I presented it as a negative because it reduces the liability, whereas the other items, they're adds. So this would be, if you really wanted in those, that's what those will cost. I hope I framed that well. I went back and forth today. I moved the brackets twice. Bill told me to just leave it. But I wanted to make sure I was coming across right, that anything in a bracket is new money, which reduces the local liability.
So the bottom line on that one is the $1.70 that we requested last week.
Yep. So in this first table, the kind of the end of it, it puts us at $1.70. Actually, Bill thought it was $1.71, but not quite one. So if we have to do work there, we can. It's hard to shave a penny. But yes, $1.70. And so you see the insurance reduction. So remember, we budgeted 12%, and that shift from that cap was a $657,000 shaving off of that. We put that right back in. We, in this proposal, restored the 500,000 that a week ago we recommended, or just beyond a week ago recommended reducing, thinking that it was a gamble, but we pay for the days when kids attend. And we think that from projections, this is what we can do. That was like an hour prior to the memo coming out that could change. So from a gamble perspective, that's not a safe bet. So we need to be thoughtful about that cost. With that, if you see the next line down, the anticipated rule change, and I had to meet with Director Crafts today to confirm this, just looking at projections, putting the 500,000 back, they project 800,000 in new additional expenses, if this rule is passed as we believe it's going to be proposed. That is a massive hit. That's $1.3 million unanticipated. We also included some funds here. I think there was pretty strong support, at least from what I was observing and taking in, to restore the potential reduction of the $50,000 to the store next door, or to the student resource project that's going on. We also have in here to restore one of the nurses, the funding that's sunsetting. So I put restore, but those funds sunset in ESER. This would be an add to the budget. That's why I put that as a plus in there. To reassign district funds. So we have some things in ESER, but really some targeted work around social emotional learning at the elementary level. We're seeing what I believe are some very positive effects. I've even talked to members of the committee that feel like if we put some resource there, maybe we can get students moving in the right direction prior to, their middle school experience, things like that. I ironically sat with Aisha Hall this afternoon for about 10 minutes to look at something. And I had my folder in front of me that I talked about a couple of weeks ago, where I have everything that I signed, from contracts to invoices to student reports. And she can confirm as my witness that we had 10 child neglect and or self-harm reports today. 10. Our kids are hurting. That SEL piece is really, really important. So in that, you can see the total change. So I took that number at the top, which is reducing our local liability, did the math on the newer items or cost drivers there. And that's how I came to the $1.70 rate. It doesn't play out in straight math. I did a note at the bottom, because when you change the revenue allocation, it messes up the math. So it's not just a straight number by penny, but it is, we did verify it, that is the $1.70. So that would be option one.
Member Bowden?
Thank you. I just a clarifying question, with the restoring one nurse, is that the nurse at Next Step that you talked about keeping? Or is this in addition to keeping the nurse at Next Step?
So this would be maintaining that position.
Okay,
Yes.
so then two would still be,
We still have a challenge of two unless we want to commit more funding.
okay.
Yes, there was three in all. And so this would be to hold on to one. And then there was another two that,
And those nurse positions are currently filled?
yes.
Okay.
ESSER funded sunsetting.
Member Heard?
Thank you. And this position, this nurse position, does that give us the opportunity to cover positions if, let's say, we have like two nurses call out or whatnot? Like, does that leave us open? Does this cover us? Because the two so this is the one, but then the other two are kind of like floater positions that like cover. So would we be covered or no, we wouldn't be covered?
So if we have people out, we'll have to default to what we did in the past where we have subs. We did have nurse subs prior to the pandemic and we had a call list. That's how we did it in the past. So we usually had people that were familiar with our schools and they were the ones that would come cover. But that's more covering when people are out. One area where the nurses have been very helpful is when you have an influx of just responsibility in the day, kids with feeding tubes, things of that nature, where someone needs to really be dedicated to that and not to the other things at the time. And so those floater positions have been able to be helpful in those influxes. They've kind of set up in respective spots. There's a couple out there that have really helped in various schools, but I want to be upfront in that that's not an easy thing to let go of if that's the case.
I just have one more thing. The targeted elementary SEL work, that's obviously not one for every elementary school. So is it going to be like a floater, someone that pops around, or is it certain elementary schools that are deemed need more help? Like, how does that work?
So that is, those are two positions that are currently in ESSER, and I'd like to roll them into the general fund. But to be real, I would love to get to a place of systemic support and have one at every elementary school. I just think that's too big to bite off this year. But we are pursuing some grants, and there's actually a pretty big state mental health grant that we're hopeful to get that will help float some of these efforts. But the amount of the money in the allotments won't be big enough to cover them all. So try to be strategic about a couple of them.
Okay. But who decides where they go and where the need is, I guess is like my question.
So the need is everywhere. What we're trying to do is figure out between grant funding and some title funds, how can we get to one at every elementary school? That would be my goal.
Counselor Scott?
Thank you. So I may have missed a few things here, so I'm just going to try to do a little catch up here. So the restoring of the nurse, this was ESSER fund. This is one of the three that was sunsetting next year. So it was already funded for this year. Is that correct?
In the current school year, yes.
In the current school year. And I thought that the SEL positions were the same thing, that we had another full year of that.
So
Initially, I thought that was part of that conversation.
the remaining ESSER funds where we've moved those 37 positions. So the two SEL positions are in there now that we could carry next year. Two of the nurses are not. And so this would be, my goal is to get it whole so that we had a nurse at every school, and we still had two at Connors, two at Geiger that are floaters. So we have two floaters in district currently. So the goal was to get to a place where we had a nurse at each of the schools.
So people are not going to like me, but I'm going to make some comments here. $1.70 is going to be a tough bite. And I understand, I listened to the meetings last week. I listened to all of your conversations. I listened to the meetings 3 times actually, and again this morning, so I could hear what everybody had to say. And I really appreciate what Member Damon said last week and the importance and what we need to do for funding of our schools. And we all recognize that, and we understand the staffing, we understand all of this. That being said, it's going to be a hard pill to swallow on the council level. I'm not going to lie to you. I think we haven't reached that conversation level, but I still think that it's going to be a tough conversation to have. You know, the last few years, we have gone pretty much zero on mill rates. We're doing pennies here on mill rates. And now we're talking about $1.70s and $3 and other conversations that are going to be very difficult for people to understand. I believe that it needs to be done. I wish that there hadn't been zero rates done over the COVID situation. I understand the need for doing that and what the thoughts were and the fear of what might happen because we didn't know and it was something new. But I think that it really affected what our mill rate is. I also think that the people in our community need to recognize that, you know, we've kept pretty much the same budget over the same several years now and not really moved up. And the needs and the changes that are happening in our community with the economy, with inflation, with everything is absolutely true out there. I don't want to have to pay it either. I'm a taxpayer as well. It's very difficult, but we have to make some decisions here. You had originally started with $1.64 last week and you all voted for $1.70. I have some concerns and I understand completely. I would like to see an SEL support in every elementary school. I personally feel that our elementary schools is where we need to be focusing on this more than necessarily the high school. To be honest with you, I don't know a 17-year-old that really wants to talk about their social. They may need that conversation. They may need it desperately to have that conversation. But I think we really need to start focusing on some of that work really in our elementary schools. And I don't want to say that I don't think it's a thing that's not needed. But that being said, when we're looking at budgets and we're looking at numbers, and that's in the budget that's still available for till next year, and there's a possibility of a mental health grant in the near future, I would like to see that removed for this year. On the nurse, I have some concerns about, we talked about it. I mean, you know, sometimes I'm going to say another tough thing. Sometimes we have to go back to the way things were. We had to call in substitute nurses sometimes. Sometimes we might have to do that again. We have to really consider what the amount is here. And with this possible change to the tuition rate on special education, $800,000, we were already talking about removing some of that cost. We have these students here in our school. We have to cover the cost of paying for these students to get the education that they need and the services that they need. $500,000 and then an additional $800,000, which, by the way, state of Maine, I don't know what you're thinking of doing, but if you're going to make a mandated change like this on an emergency level, then you should be funding this to the communities and the municipalities. And shame on you for making a change like this and expecting us all to pay for this. That is absolutely ridiculous. And yeah, I'll stop there. So I would like us to reconsider some of those things if we could. I will tell you that tomorrow night's budget conversation, we're going to start our general conversation on the city council level. And I will be asking specifically on where they're thinking they want to land at the bottom line here, because we do need to know that. And we don't know as of yet. And I think that we should at this point know what people are thinking. I think yeah, let's just start with that, please.
Member Bowden?
Thank you. Just a clarifying question, under the reassigned district funds, for the targeted elementary SEL work, what district funds are you looking to reassign there?
We think through some attrition that there may be a cost savings. It won't be enough necessarily for a full position, but we think we can save some money there. So that would help fund that second role. Through a job change. Yeah.
Any other questions and comments on option one?
My comment was going to be, we have other options to discuss.
Okay. All right.
All right, so I'll continue down in number 2, again, not by priority per se, but I have the additional subsidy, the insurance reduction, the tuition rate changes for special purpose private schools, and also the store next door. And so I won't reiterate all of the pieces because they're the same as above to an extent. But what you do see is some of those other positions are not included. And so what you have for total change is a reduction of $111,400 and $11, ironically. And so that's a 5 cent reduction on the mill rate from the $1.64. So that puts us at $1.59. Is that correct, Bill? I know we did all those calculations today. So it would be a $1.59 request on the mill rate in proposal number 2, which puts funding back for the store next door work.
And that leaves those SEL positions in the ESSER funds for this year?
So,
ESSER funds?
so there's not enough ESSER funds to fund all of these positions. That's the thing that we're running up against. And so what it would mean is, for example, in option 1, the some of the ESSER work for SEL would continue. The nurse piece, I will scrape, but I don't know that we'll have enough to get there. And some of that challenge is we have serious mechanical work that's going to begin. And every single bit of that is markedly higher than what we budgeted when we got the ESSER funds because of how things have increased in cost. So it's right now we're in that unfortunate trade-off of, do we want to complete these projects as we had intended, even with some reductions in the work that's going to be done? We're already looking at that. But the cost has just gone up so much that it's biting into the funds that we wanted to just use for all of those positions to continue one more year.
I have a question. I like to stay gullibly optimistic. So if this whole special purpose private school rule change doesn't pan out, and we approve one of these options with that $800,000 included, does that just get absorbed into the general fund, or what happens with that?
So the committee certainly would have input on how those funds are spent. So if a budget is approved and we've built around that allocation for the additional tuition costs, and that doesn't happen, those would be funds that the committee could make decisions on how to use or to not use, should that occur. And I did share in option 3 along those lines of being thoughtful of, and I put, should additional resources avail themselves, and I mean that with big bold letters and highlighted. This is not an ask tonight, but I thought it might come up that if the $800,000 is not needed, or if there's a different allocation, or if there's a different something, for the school committee to have it in their minds of some other things that could be done. And so you can see here we have kind of the same items all the way down through the store next door funds. And then there's a grade 2 teacher that sits in ESSER funding that helps Connors round out their teams. A reading recovery position that's out of school again in ESSER. I have here that the SEL at every elementary school, I just took a prorated number and I did ×5. If we were able to float that. A general ed clinician, the dean of students at the middle school, the high school is asking for social workers and/or additional substance abuse counselors. The attendance and family engagement coordinator at Montello, which also works closely with the store next door folks and the student resource piece. They're doing a lot of great work, and we're getting a lot of great feedback from families who are feeling a little disconnected from school because of the work that Natasha's doing over there. Again, that's an ESSER, looking at potentially bringing that back in. I also put funding for apprenticeship programs and oversight. And I wasn't as specific enough in my little bullet there, but this was in the vein of the teacher preparation programs and having someone to help coordinate that work. There are associated costs with the apprenticeship work. Again, we're going to chase dollars, but if that were a thing, then we should have a method to do it. So that piece is a 47-cent addition on the mill rate. I'm not asking for that tonight. I just wanted you to know that should funds avail themselves, I think these are worthy items to consider, but that 47 cents would be in addition to the 164.
So 211? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure I'm doing the math right on this.
And I didn't bring that thinking that's feasible tonight. I brought that thinking, should funding change, should that 800,000 go away? These are things that you as school committee members could have in the back of your minds as maybe what things you might prioritize.
So this is implying that one of the 2 deans of students at Lewiston Middle School will not be continuing in the fall. Is that what I'm understanding?
So that one is in ESER and so we have the funds for that currently. But this is where we get into that kind of that perspective of, let's say the state comes back and says, look, we're not changing that funding model. And there's $800,000 on the table. You as a committee may decide, you know, I do want to keep one of those nurses and I do want to keep this. How do we pay for that? And the way in which we do that is how some things come out of ESER so other things can go in.
Member Bowden?
Thank you. Do you know when that rule change may or may not come into fruition?
All we know is that they withdrew it because they want to edit the language, but that we will see it again. And
Okay,
so
so you don't
The
know,
sense was like in a couple of weeks, a month, but it's not.
so it
clear.
could be after the budget vote happens
It
with
could
the
be at any,
public?
it could be at any point in time. It could be after the referendum. The only thing that I know for sure is with emergency rulemaking, which is the language they use to initiate that process, it has to allow for a 10-day input period. And that's it. Once that 10-day input period has happened, they can make a decision and it can just become rule instantly.
And so if it were to disappear, I know you have, you just went through all of this, but you know, would you be bringing all of this to us? Like, I want all this back with this money, or would we be able to take that 800,000 and kind of reabsorb it and hold on to it for adding to our fund balance just in case something happens? Or are you comfortable with that? Or are you saying that this is exactly what you want to spend it on if that doesn't happen?
No, I think I just want to put a list of things on your minds, should something like that happen. But no, we can absolutely leave it as unidentified or unspent, if you will, and carry it into future budgets. And then for number 4, which is not really a listed option per se, but it's something that we've talked about a number of times. I wanted to put it to a table so you can see it more formally and to start building the thinking around it, that if we build a reserve using unprecedented fund balance, which is a possible thing to do, that this year we could allocate $3 million to that using the referendum process. But because we're using fund balance, it would not have an impact on the tax rate. But what this does do is it's from a financial planning perspective. One, no organization our size should not have a reserve. We are too big of an organization to not have some money in that separate kind of account. But also with these budgets, as they get more and more lean, there'll be times that we need to bring things to you to get potential approval to use those funds for a repair, a staff, you name it. But also there's sunsetting rules on fund balance carryover. And this is something we've talked about for years, that we want to make sure that we're building ourselves some security in what we can use the funds for without losing them. And the permissible amount of fund balance you can carry over right now, I believe, is at 9%. And over the next 4 years, that's going to dwindle back down to 5%. And so just kind of planning that 3-year window, trying to get ahead of things. I also want to share how hard this budget conversation has been this year. If we don't start building some kind of reserve, we could have a catastrophic year. And it wouldn't just be us, it would be statewide. But if there's a curtailment or something to that effect with this funding, we don't have other places to just go take it. It'd be really, really hard. So,
Counselor Scott?
So we're already using 5 million of fund balance in this current budget. And you're suggesting that we reserve this additional 3? Is that what you're suggesting? Leaving us with 2?
2 in the current that are unallocated or unencumbered. But we still have, we anticipate a not as big, but we do anticipate a fund balance from the current fiscal year that will become realized after our audit over the summer and fall.
So if that's the case, then why shouldn't we be using some of this money to cover some of those costs? I really think that we should. I mean, if we're gonna, I understand that we want to keep some in there, but we will still be keeping some in there. If we can use some of this money, we wouldn't be having such a hard conversation about some of these other stuff, I think. Honestly.
Yeah,
I mean, to me, the store next door, I'm 100%. I said that, I asked, Chairman Parks to say that last week. I fully believe in supporting that. I very concerned about the special education tuition cost. And I would like to see us able to fund some of this other stuff while still keeping the mill rate down. If we can use some of that to keep our mill rate down and bring it down, I mean, why wouldn't we? I'm just gonna ask that. Why wouldn't we?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question. And I think the reason we want to be careful with use of fund balance to float 1 year is because it turns into 2 and then 3. And what happens with the dwindling fund balance is, so let's say this year, hypothetically, we used $6 million in fund balance to just have next school year's funding. That means we either raise $6 million next year in addition, or we are kind of on the hook for it again. And anything we don't raise to that level, we're in trouble. And so I think in a 2-year cycle, you can do that. The problem is year 3. So like Member Scott just said, if we used $5 million to start this year, and then we used $3 million for a reserve, it leaves us with 2. So we'll have some carryover this year. Will we have 5 or 6 next year? Or will we be short? So in year 2, I think we could scrape by. But year 3, you're looking at a lean budget in FY24, no fund balance for 25, and now you have a $6 million hole. And so when the funding comes out from the state, if you don't have that fund balance to use, you have a $6 million problem before you even start your budget. This year, we had a $7.8 million problem. If we didn't have fund balance, we would have had a 13.8, or excuse me, a 12.8, because we're using 5 currently. We'd have a $12.8 million problem. Those are problems that are not reconcilable. So that's the challenge to using too much fund balance in any 1 year, because it's a 3-year, 4-year process.
And what is the difference again of the 3 million sitting in the reserve fund versus keeping the remaining 5 million all in the fund balance?
So the biggest difference is, as it sits in fund balance, you can't use it because it hasn't gone through the right process to be approved through a referendum to make it accessible to the school committee to make decisions to use it. If it's sitting in fund balance, you can't just activate it without certain processes, like a referendum, depending on what you want to do for cost. So it sits in your fund balance, but the allocation process is approved by you, the city, and referendum.
So if we move the 3 million to the reserve, then at any point that can be used through what process? What is the process to use that?
So my understanding is if it goes through the right process, you could make a decision. So I could come to you and say October and say that tuition cost was more than we thought, and it's already gone. And now we need more funding to do this, or we need more staff in a specific program, and talk about how we would fund things like that, or some kind of, I don't want to put bad things out there, but you could have a serious mechanical failure or a pipe leak and have things freeze up, or those kinds of things that there's no mechanism in the budget to just go repair. A reserve could be used for those kinds of situations.
And one last question. Why did you choose 3 million?
Chose 3 million because I'm trying to tier it out in that 3-4 year model, where I think because of fund balance, it's actually a sustainable number that if we don't have to use it or much of it, it gets you into that 4th year of budgeting that might make things a bit easier on the community.
And is it accruing interest?
That I'll have to check on.
Member Eames? Oh, okay. Counselor Scott?
And you said that there's an anticipated fund balance coming in for this year. Do you have any idea as to what that might be?
So I've asked Adam this question, and he said that he really doesn't like to touch projections at this point in the year. But he said in a little while, you start to get closer to that closeout of the hiring piece. We still, as you saw in your packets, we're still hiring on a pretty regular basis. So anything projection with like a new hire, it starts to really skew numbers quickly. Adam's not here at the moment. I would say that I feel like, Bill, you might want to look away. I could envision a 4-ish million fund balance.
So
And
can
please do not hold my feet to that fire.
Okay.
That's a very dangerous statement.
Can I make a possible another suggestion then? To what I was saying before, why don't we put the anticipated SPPS rule change of $800,000 towards that particular reserve, taking that out of the budget, and then we can work with what we have, knowing that that'll be covered by that, and we're not using any of that fund balance. Is that a possibility to do that?
It certainly is a possibility.
We remove the 800,000 anticipated SPPS rule change for tuition, 800,000 that has been added, right? So we can keep our 500,000 that we had originally wanted to put back in there. We keep the store next door. We can restore the one nurse. We can reassign the district funds under the ESER for targeted elementary SEL work, that total thing of number one, but remove the 800,000 and see what our mill rate would be there and where we can go with that.
Yeah, I can certainly get you a number on that pretty quick. Bill, hold on 1 second. I'm gonna use my phone.
Sorry, Linda. And what happens if we do end up owing the 800,000?
It's about 35.
Okay, so then we would use the 800,000. That would leave us only, got it. Okay. Thank you.
Still have the 2 million and the possible other.
Your mic.
We still have the 2 million in there that we're not touching. This is from the 3 million that he's putting in the reserve and the possible funds that are coming in later this year, not knowing even if that's just $1 million later this year from fund balance left over, right? That gives us 3 million plus another 2.2 because we'd only be using 800,000 and that puts us at 5.2 to start next year. It still puts us in a better place than without nothing. I don't know. I'm playing with numbers here. I'm trying to make this work, thinking outside the box.
So I think, and I love member Damon's math is like instant. So as I use the calculator on my phone, he said that's 36 cents and he's spot on. It's 36.12 cents of a reduction if we take out that 800,000. And so in that particular case, you would be, if you went with hypothetically option one, you would be, I'm looking at the wrong page, instead of $1.70, you'd be $1.34. I would also just put it out there to the committee, if the reserve fund is something you're comfortable with, again, tea leaves, would you want to consider putting additional funds in that reserve, which again could be used later? I don't think it's unlikely that there's going to be a shift there. I think it's likely that there's going to be a shift there.
Isn't that kind of like a shell game? Instead of using the fund balance to apply to the budget, we're using the shell balance to apply to the reserve, which would then be used to cover things that we're not covering.
What it does though, is it moves fund balance to be accessible to you. If I thought this was a maybe, I'd be comfortable not moving additional funds, but I don't know that this is a maybe. I think this is a real situation. I think the other thing that happens with money in the reserve, you can still choose to use that later. It's accessible if something comes up, but again, right now it's not accessible in that sense. So I'm not pushing it. I think it could be something to consider. If you're saying, I think that $800,000 is something we could use reserve for, if that's the need, I would literally put it in there. So not treating it like a shell game, but saying, let's allocate for it. Have the reserve if you need it.
That makes sense.
That's what I'm suggesting. It's there.
Okay, that makes sense. Member Eames?
It seems like that's exactly what the reserve is for. We have no idea what's going to happen from DOE rulemaking. It could be that it's never going to happen. It could be that it happens for September. We don't know. And so that's what the reserve is exactly for, those unexpected hits that, the leaky roof or in this case, the rulemaking. So it seems like a good idea to me.
Member Hurd?
Thank you. So I do like what Counselor Scott has proposed, as it does bring the mill rate down a little bit. I was a little concerned last week when we did vote to increase, as I had the same feeling that Counselor Scott had, that it was not going to be approved by City Council. I would also like, and I know we've talked about this will be our second year talking about a potential grant position within our organization. And I do think we need to look at that potentially, as there is money out there that's being left on the table. So I do think that's something we need to look at. I also think, and I know I had spoken up before about the store next door, and I do feel comfortable funding it, but I do think that we also need to get on a path where, as a nonprofit, they are working to get grants and get some of their own funding. And so I am fine with the money going back in there, but I also think that and again, this is not my place to do that, but maybe there needs to be a conversation had that this is the plan for this year, and by next year, this is what needs to happen, or the year after that, this is what needs to happen, so that there is a clear precedent set that that they are going to be required to acquire their own funding in the future.
Member Eames?
If there is to be such a conversation, it should end up with something in writing in the end, so that it's very clear what's going on. Because I feel like there might have been some talking past each other and not fully communicating. Thank you.
Member Whitlow?
Thank you. So I know that I had brought up previously about Ice and Mud Week at the high school, and I just kind of curious. I don't know if we really had a full discussion about that here at this level, so just curious.
Yeah, I guess where I left it was to try to get through finals and get feedback from staff and students to just see where that is. But as I sit here, I'm actually with you that I think if we're going to go back to the midterms and finals piece and there's room in there for remediation, teachers are available after school. There's times during the day, and as I think many members of the committee have said, really want to get back to students having that focus in high school, especially of doing work with built-in opportunities, but not all these exacerbated things. And we did figure out a savings there. We had shared on a prior memo. I don't remember the number. I want to say it was, no, I think it was 77,000. Sevens are sticking in my head also. So I think it was mud, ice, and some summer dollars was 77. But we didn't pull that out of the budget at this time.
Member Bowden?
Thank you. So along the lines of what Counselor Scott just suggested, as far as taking that 800,000 and moving it into reserve and then removing it from one of these charts. With option 2, what would that decrease the mill rate to? Because you had said the way that it was, you had it at $1.59 increase. So would that drop it down to, like, is my math wrong? Would it be like $1.24? That's what Member Damon just said. I'm not taking credit for that math.
Yeah, we figured 36 cents was that. So it would be $1.23.
I guess, and just as a follow-up, Counselor Scott, what are your feelings on $1.23? I know you don't speak for the whole council, but do you think the council would be more inclined to kind of entertain that?
No, I do not speak for the whole council, but I personally would be, I want to cut it. I don't want $1.70. I'll be honest with you. I would have a hard time swallowing that. I really don't want, I like the $1.34. I think I could fight for that. I mean, we have to fight for our schools. The reality is that our schools need these things. And I'd like to bring the mill rate down as much as we can, but there are costs involved in educating our students. And I don't want to bring it down too much so that we're, I think we're already working with bare knuckles here. And my thought was thinking outside the box with that 800,000, not knowing yet, most likely it's going to happen with some emergency thing from the state, but I would be okay with the 134, and I would be okay to fight for the 134. I don't know where that's going to land. I can't speak for the others, but I'm comfortable with that.
We also need to not sell ourselves short. If we drop it down too low, that sets the precedent and the expectation that we're going to continue to do that. And that's what we've done year after year. And that's how we're shortchanging our district. So we also need to set an expectation that we have to fund our schools at an appropriate level. Member Damon?
Yeah, I think that, we have definitely over time shortchanged the schools. If we look at it globally, at the $1.70 increased mill rate that we're asking for, that still is only 38% of the total mill rate. there is this absolute insane fixation on a $30 mill rate as being a death knell to any type of investment or development in the city of Lewiston that has to change. We have been brutalized by that $30 mill rate for the last 4 years, in spite of what was happening with the COVID funds. We're $100+ million budget. The city side is roughly 60 this year, right? So we're nearly twice the size of the city budget, and yet we're less than 40% of the ask. The numbers really, if it wasn't for the state funding mechanism, you think we got a problem now, the number would be huge. And as I've outlined before, we're not even keeping track. The dollars that we're actually asking the taxpayers of, it's not even begin to create the same purchasing power for every dollar we get that it did 25 years ago. 25 years ago. What we're asking for now are 58-cent pieces, not dollars. That's the purchasing power we have left with these dollars we're getting. If we're going to ever move this school district forward and meet the needs and some of the requirements that we have, we have to have the funding to do it. There are 3 additional contract bargaining unit agreements that we have to do this year. None of those increases have been taken into account yet because they're unknowns. And when we look at what happened with the police department this year and the increases that had to happen to retain and attract, which is exactly what we've been trying to do with negotiations for the last 2 years. We've been trying to attract the best people we can and retain the really good people that we already have. Those increases next year around are going to be in there too. So when Jake talks about the cliff in year 3, that's going to also be impacted again by a new teachers negotiation in the interim. So we have to keep these dollars in here now, or we'll never get them back. So in my mind, the $1.70 ask is more than reasonable, and we have to fight for it. And that's what I think that's what the board has to agree is the ask. Because when I look at the police department, 98 people in the police department, 26 of those people there, and don't believe me, they earn whatever they have, but 26 of them are over $100,000 is what's scheduled for them. So that means that those people are basically supervisors or administrators looking over 3 other people in the department. We have administrators, principals that have 100+ staff and 800 kids in a building that aren't being paid that much. It's an insult to the professional educators and to this board and to the taxpayers to think that we're going to settle for that.
Member Bowden?
Thank you. I really don't want this, that talking point to turn into comparing teachers and police officers because they're 2 totally different professions. But I will say that I'm still not comfortable with the $1.70. I'm just not comfortable with it. I've been watching budget meetings and discussions between the school committee and the city council for a number of years. And we've been down this road. It's not going to go well. I already know they're going to come back and say, absolutely not. That's too much. You need to decrease it. And I'm not saying you're wrong as far as, we need to set a precedence. We need to get somewhere. We need to get more money. I get it. Um, but I'm also a taxpayer and it's a big mill rate increase this year. And it's tough to say what's more important, you know. I'm okay with the $1.34, I suppose, but I guess what I really want is a little bit more guidance from Jake on that and how he feels about moving that 800,000 to reserves. Like, are you comfortable with that? Are you comfortable dipping into that fund balance? Because it sounds to me like that's money that if we don't have, we are really gonna like shoot ourselves in the foot.
I think, as I understand it, it's feasible. My one concern is because the funds are not allocated, it's not supplanting. So I think that's a piece of that language. But I also want to make sure that the language around the reserve rules will allow us to do it the way in which I think. So I guess what I want to say is, yes, it's doable by reserve. What I have to explore is, do we have to do 3 and then 8 separately? Because it's got a label on it. And I just want to make sure that we're doing it the right way. But yes, feasible.
Member Eames.
A couple of things. First, the 8 is just a guess. So designating 1,000 doesn't necessarily make sense, since it is really a guess, correct?
It's an educated guess, but
Educated
it is the guess part of it is we don't know what the state language is going to say
Right.
about any kind of caps on the tuition rates or not.
Right.
And just to add a little more food for thought, we don't always budget prorated, but what happens is during the school year, the rates change, typically in and around January.
Mm,
And so all the unexpended funds, typically year to year from students being absent, gets chewed up by the new rates. And so there has to be a constraint there somewhere, and we just don't know what it will be.
And the other thing I wanted to just say is that maybe because I'm an educator, it just seems like we have to fight for the schools. We have to ask for what we think we deserve. If the city, it's such a strange system that the city council gets any say in the matter at all, but we have to face it, that's true. But we have to assert our need for what our kids deserve. So I still want to say, I don't care if one's uncomfortable with a number, one has to fight for the kids.
Counselor Scott.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate here. And I'm going to talk about some things that I hear in the community. So I'm an educator myself, special education. I homeschooled my kids for 9 years because I and my husband felt that their education was our top priority. And we focused on that. And I didn't work for 9 years. I stayed home to educate my kids. Education is a #1 priority for me. It's why I ran for the school committee in 2011, and I stayed on the school committee for 6 years. That being said, and I agree, we fight for education of our kids. 4 years ago, the Lewiston school budget was $80 million. 81 million closer to. This year, we're at 100 million. When you talk to folks out in the community and you ask, these are the questions they say. What's our graduation rate? Has our graduation rate gone up? Our student enrollment has gone down. We continually have to educate special needs kids. We have to provide social emotional learning for our kids. We have to provide all of these services for our kids. So I'm going to speak again, devil's advocate. People are not like this, but there are folks out there in our community that say that is not the job of the school. The job of the school is to educate our kids, to give them the opportunities to become a plumber, to go to college, to become a doctor, to make them lawyers, to make sure that they can read, write, arithmetic, understand civic services in our community and in our nation, and those sorts of things. And we continue to have to add these services because of pieces of legislation, mandates that come down from government entities, from whether you're a Democrat or Republican, it doesn't matter. All of this comes down, and it comes down on the back of the local person. And we have to make a decision. And at the same time, we have city councilors that have to make a decision when we see crime going up, gunshots happening, violence happening, police forces that were losing people because they don't make enough money, and police officers going to other districts because it's easier to be a police officer in Poland than it is to be in Lewiston, Maine. and they weren't making enough money. So we have to make that decision to protect our community. And we don't have enough plow trucks, and we don't have enough sidewalk plows, and we don't have enough men to work to pick up the trash in our community. And we have to think about all of these different things. I understand fighting. I will stand up and fight for kids every day of my life. But I also understand economics. And we cannot afford to continue to do this without seeing some specific changes and ensuring that our kids are all graduating, all going off to a regional tech school, going off to college, and being successful students and adults in the future. And how do we do that? By continuing to put money in, but not always seeing the outcomes that we need to see. I'm sorry to sound so harsh, but that's the truth of it. And I wish I had all the money in the world to say, this is what we're going to do. I've always said that, but we don't. And that's why we're in these positions. We have to make these tough decisions. And by God, they suck. Excuse my language, but they do. But we have to make the decisions. I will fight. I fight all the time for different things, but I cannot fight for $1.70. I don't see it happening. And that's where I sit right now. I will stick with $1.34.
I would like to add, if we look at school districts that better fund their schools, their community crime rates are significantly lower than our community crime rates. I am a strong believer in if we better funded our schools and our teachers, that we would see a reduction in police costs and a reduction in burden on our police force. If our teachers were better, if our teachers had the capacity to better educate our students, that over time would be much better for our community as a whole. But we time and again shortchange ourselves, and we end up getting the same. We ended up getting lower graduation rates and high crime rates and all those same things because we continue to do the same thing and expect a better outcome. And it's not working. At some point, we have to change that. Member Damon?
I'd like to make a motion.
Can we open it to the public first? No.
I guess there's discussion. I guess it can be open to the. Yep.
Are you comfortable holding your motion? Okay, thank you. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak?
I just want to ask a clarifying question as I'm crunching numbers over here. So when we're talking about the $800,000, we're talking about removing the expenditure from the budget, correct? We're not talking about removing the additional subsidy. So the $3 million would stay the same. It's just we would remove but the anticipated tuition rate of $800,000. So our expenditure side of the budget would be going down $800,000.
Correct, with an option to, again, we want to verify the steps, but to use reserve funds should that situation present itself.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure because I heard people talking about the $800,000 and it wouldn't be moving that revenue of $800,000 to the $3 million reserve. We would just essentially be reducing the budget by $800,000. Okay. Better now.
Just a reminder to please state your name when you come up to the mic.
Hello, my name is Miguel Garcia and I'm from Mexico. So thank you for this opportunity that you are giving me. And I would like to talk about this issue that really bothers us as a family. And I hope you understand my poor English. So I'm going to start with the help that we are getting from Jamie and Joel. So they work for the school. And through them, I got my job. And they've been helping our family or my family. And they've been helping other families. So I understand that they could be fired. So I think that in order to do that, the people that has the power, then they should know what they are doing. Just making a decision without knowing what you are doing is not fair, is not right. So therefore, I would like to ask to whomever it may concern to think about what you are going to do. And it's all I can say right now, but they are good people. They've been working hard physically and as socially also. So we are grateful to all the help that school and them are giving us. So I myself work for the school here in Lewiston. So like I said, thanks to them. And again, thank you ever so much. And I gotta leave because my job is waiting for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just a quick clarification, there was no thoughts from the committee around firing folks. There was, so that wasn't the term that we used, just to be clear.
Good evening. My name is Luke Jensen. I reside in Ward 5 at 11 Sylvan Avenue. To those of you who I haven't gotten a chance to meet, I used to be a city councilor as well as a school committee member, served in the school committee for 3 years. So I don't have anything particularly enlightening, just wanted to share my thoughts after watching the meetings at home, finally being here in person. So I guess first, just thank you guys. It's not fun work. I mean, the graduation, like LHS is like the highlight of serving on the committee, and budget season is probably the lowest. And one of the downsides of democratic system, of governance is you should always do the ethical thing, but you can't always do the moral thing. We don't have enough money for everything. So no matter what budget you pass, it's going to be immoral and you're going to have to live with it. And it stunk every single year that we had to do it. And so just know that, yeah, it's a tough position and I don't envy the fact that you guys are in it. So my comments related particularly to the budget. After seeing the meetings, it's probably too high for the council to pass, to be perfectly honest. So be prepared for them to, if you give them $1.70, they're probably going to ask you to lower it. It is what it is. I get making a principled stand and saying this is what we need for our students. But at the end of the day, you're just going to create another meeting. You're going to eradicate a little bit of public confidence. And it's not going to be good in the long haul. So I can think of like the Tom Shannons, the Paul St. Pierre's, when I sat on the board, they would say, hey, Luke, that's, I get taking a principled stance, but you have to think of the big picture and what's going to happen at the end. So I just encourage you guys to do your best and just try and get it, done tonight. And having served in the school committee and the city council, as I'm sure Councilor Scott could attest, the city does make a lot of sacrifices to help the schools. Not that they give the schools everything that you need, but they do make some sacrifices there. Particularly after the Great Recession about 15 years ago, there was student populations were rising quite a bit in the district, and several buildings in this district had to have additions created, and the city had to borrow for that. And so the city has paid a lot, and as a result of things like that, the city and past councils have taken things off their plate, put things on the back burner, say, hey, maybe we'll get to that in a few years. So they've deprioritized a lot of things. And I know serving on the facilities subcommittee, which I don't know who's serving on it right now. I know Mr. Damon served on it in previous. There are things that we put off too. So again, it's just not a great situation for a city, but the city does make sacrifices. And in my experience, the city usually waits to see what the school is going to come up with. And what the district puts forward, there's obviously some negotiation there, but when you guys put forward, then they kind of decide, all right, what can we do on the city side of things? The fact that we have to borrow for a lot of things in the city level, like repairing roads and other things that should be in the yearly budget, that we have to borrow for that, it's just absolutely ridiculous. And I can tell you as a former city councilor, what they really look for is they want things that are going to help build economic growth in the city. Graduation rates prime. That's the number one thing they're looking at. They probably also care about the test scores, but with the opt-out movement in Lewiston, it's not a big concern. I wouldn't worry too much about that. So I guess my advice would be whatever you can do to increase the graduation rate, make that more of a priority and a focus, you should do, because it's only going to get the council to be more supportive of budgets that you put forward now and in the future. And it's also going to get the community behind saying, oh, they're making progress in the district. This is probably not going to be popular, but when you compare Lewiston, like the standards and what it takes to like actually graduate, what the experience you have to go through in the school system, Lewiston honestly is pretty high standard. It's not easy to graduate in Lewiston. And a lot of students have issues that prevent them from doing it, but getting a degree from Lewiston is not as easy as it is from even surrounding regional school districts. And so I don't want to say lower the bar, because that's just not a good phrase to use, especially as a former educator myself. But maybe look at different options and alternatives. And the district's done a great job in the last few years of creating alternative programs, and it's absolutely warmed my heart. But just keep doing more on that. And the more you guys can do, the more the city is going to be open to the ideas that you have. And the more they'll be accepting of things like $1.70. I also want to say that supporting the store next door, well, of course it does help with the graduation rate. I think that should be a priority. I really see the program as being very helpful and helping boost the graduation rate and helping a lot of students. And let's be real, in modern times, schools aren't just educational facilities. They're really social service centers. You're providing social services to students who need certain things that would not get them otherwise. So when you guys craft budgets, you're crafting a budget that's different from a lot of parts of the rest of the state, which the media doesn't always like to focus on. So just something to keep in mind for people. It's pretty clear that the state should change how it approaches school budgets anyways. The ED 279 is extremely flawed. It's just absolutely flawed. It doesn't make sense to me. It never did the 3 years when I was on the school committee doing budgets. The policy of reimbursing some types of funds just puts us in a huge bind as a district. It's absolutely ridiculous. And also, it should be abundantly clear that the state should directly pay for special education, out of district placement, and out of district transportation costs. Education is the role of the state. It's the role of the state, not each city. And so the fact that the state isn't stepping in and saying, hey, we see the position that you're in Lewiston, other service center communities, let us take charge of those costs directly, since they're mandates that you guys don't control. And so that's something I'd really much like to see at the state level. And maybe you guys could pass a resolution advocating for it. I don't know, but that's definitely something that needs to change. Also wanted to mention that I do support the nursing position. When I was on the school committee, one of the last few things we did were add nursing positions to the district. I've had a couple of years of being an overworked teacher myself. I totally get it. But it's absolutely dangerous when you have nurses that are overworked. And we think of like what Ronnie Parody was saying a few years ago when I was on in your guys' seat. Just some of the conditions that the nurses have to work in and just how stressed out they are. It's absolutely dangerous. So I definitely support adding that nursing position. But again, not my call, just want to recommend it. Let's see. And also, let's see. So like the mill rate and the kind of arbitrary nature that it is, the honest truth is taxes are already too high. So just saying here, this is the number we're going for. It's not really saying, hey, if it goes beyond this, taxes are too high. They're already too high. It's basically saying to the public here, we're not going to go above this. This is what we're aiming for. We're going to do our best. So I get this is some frustration over that and with reevaluation and everything too. But when it comes to the mill rate, I mean, the arbitrary nature is just, we have to consider that taxes are already too high. So you guys have a lot on your plate. I don't envy the decision that you're in. I thank you all for the service that you're doing. I do really want to give kudos to you guys. And again, for Superintendent Langless and staff for the budget and the work that's been done. This is a very difficult budget year. This is a very difficult district to create a budget for. And so I wish the rest of the state would come to realize that, and Augusta maybe someday will. But until then, we're probably going to keep going through this cycle. So yes, as a city, we can do what we can to build economic momentum, increase the tax base, do what we can locally. Once change happens at a national level, then teachers will get paid what they deserve, probably minimum 60K. But we're not going to be able to do that at the city level. It's not going to happen. That's going to have to be a national movement. So again, I'm all for that. So thank you all for what you do and good luck.
Thank you, Luke.
Hey, hello, school board. My name is Khan Maywan, and I just want to say I'm very thankful and appreciative, and my heart is just racing to be honored to be standing in next to you or speaking on something I'm very passionate about, and that is the store next door and my community. I would just like to start off. Are you familiar with the Tree Street neighborhood? It's crucial to understand that impeding the work of the store next door not only affects the store, but also harms the Tree Street community. This area is one of the underprivileged in Maine, with over 40% of its residents living below the poverty line. The Tree Street community faces numerous challenges, including living in those century-old apartment buildings and having the highest rates of childhood lead poisoning in Maine. These issues have led to poor school performance due to negative impacts on these children's health. Countless individuals, both past and present, who have been involved in the Store Next Door organization have shared how much it has helped them overcome obstacles and create a better future for themselves and their community. Many have credited the organization providing them with a sense of purpose and belonging, as well as skills and confidence to pursue their goals. And because those people, unfortunately, are not here right now, I cannot speak on their behalf. I can only speak on my experience with the Store Next Door. As someone who experienced poverty as a student and has grown up in the Tree Street neighborhood, I can attest to the difficulties of not having enough to eat, clean clothes, or even a safe space to cry.
During those challenging times, the store next door was a lifeline for me. They provided me with essential items like food, clothing, and hygiene products, which allowed me to focus my studies and not worry about my basic needs. Moreover, the store next door was more than just a place to obtain essential items. It was a haven where I could find comfort and support during trying times. Mary and Jamie, who were the first adults I called by their first names, were always willing to listen, offer guidance, and provide a shoulder to cry on. They made me feel like I was part of a caring community that was invested in my success and my well-being. There was one night when the police were called to my home due to a disturbance, and I was scared for my life. Hold on. I had nobody to call, so I reached out to Mary Seaman. It was my senior year, and I just wanted to graduate. It was my senior year, and I just wanted to graduate from high school and leave Maine. The next day after the incident, Mary helped me get into new beginnings. When it came time to apply for college, I had no family members willing to sign my college documents, but she helped me get a letter. She helped me get a letter from the state claiming I was an at-risk youth. I was able to put myself through college thanks to one gesture. Every year when I was audited, I showed them the same letter she gave me. There was also times when my entire building was infested with bed bugs, and Mary came to my home and took my clothes home and washed them for me. The store next door and its staff have been a vital support system for me, and I can say the entire Tree Street community, and their work is crucial for our well-being and success. In conclusion, the store next door is more than just a store. It's a lifeline for many individuals in the Tree Street neighborhoods. I urge you to support this organization and its effort to provide much needed assistance to those in need in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Con.
Natasha Turcott. I also am a Lewiston resident and also a employee at Montello. I don't know how I'm gonna follow up with that or how I can hold myself together after hearing him. So prior to working at Lewiston Public Schools, I worked at Advocates for Children. I worked with Jamie, multiple students that were pregnant teens that would have never graduated without her help. Our McKinney-Vento students are homeless students and families that we have right now. It is at an all-time high. These students do not have places to sleep that are clean. They do not have clothes. They do not have a place to wash their clothes and do not come to school because of that. If we're looking at high school graduation rates, we need to look at attendance and how we can keep these kids in school and attending these schools. Jamie and Joel are at a call away every day. I need shoes for them. I need clothing for them to get these kids to school. They're always there. If you're looking at grants, like my position started as a grant, and I'm hoping that it continues in the school board future, but looking at grants, like I know it was mentioned here that is something that there is many programs out there and grants funding that you should be looking into to complete, their years coming for their positions. Right now, like you can't just take it away. I do think that you guys need to give them an opportunity to help them supply that grant and help the school board continue those programs. But SEL is super important for these kids. You want them to graduate. They need to be able to be fed. They need clothes. They need to be able to regulate their emotions to get to class and attend school. And all of that is, is extremely important to them. And I thank you guys all.
Thank you, Natasha.
My heart's racing too. So hi, I'm Mary. I worked for the school district for 35 years doing a variety of things. I started at Pettingill Elementary, went to Alaska, did work up there, and yes, they have 2 weeks in March. Just so. I can keep beating this dead horse called the store next door, but I don't really want to. What I really want to do is be available to you folks as a resource. I started the project with one rack in the corner of another room, which is why it's called the store next door. I'm back as the donations coordinator. I'm humping lots of really dirty laundry and making it available. We got the food pantry. We're ready to go with Good Shepherd soon. We've got hygiene, we've got soaps, we've got everything. So please come ask your questions, come visit the site. It's now up and running. I don't know how we're ever gonna get grant writing done because we don't have a grant writer. I'm doing laundry.
Mary, I have
Anyone
one
wants my
question.
contact,
Can you speak really quickly to how the program was funded when you started it and over the years, how you were able to keep it going for so long?
Begged, borrowed, and didn't do much stealing. I've lived in Turner my whole life. I ran a business. I was well connected. I know lots of people, having taught in Lewiston forever. I don't know, my family had auto parts, so I tapped into all of the car dealerships. It's just, it shouldn't be how we are supporting that program, but it's how we support it. These kids call me mom. They show up on my door. They come spend the night there at my house on Mother's Day. And I wouldn't have it any other way because they had nobody. I don't even want to get into, I want to get into some of those stories, so please call me.
Thank you, Mary. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak?
Ron Potvin, 291 Pond Road, former school committee member, former budget member, and chief operating officer of the store next door. A couple things that have come out tonight in the discussions that, you know, from all of my perspectives, I kind of want to put in, mention. Let's start with the store next door. First, I want to thank the committee for supporting putting the 50,000 back to keep this program going. Where we're not in a position, you know, to be able to take on that expense. Keeping that in mind, you're only keeping that funded at 2 positions. When we started this 3 years ago, we were 3 positions, down to 2.5. Now you're making a proposal to go 2, while we've gone from 250 children to 310. Math doesn't weigh right. I think if the gentleman that spoke earlier, if you multiply that by 310, you kind of start to absorb the impact that's happening down there and what Jamie and Joel single-handedly together are accomplishing. And I'm not going to give up. I'm going to continue to urge this school committee to keep this running at 3 positions. That's that important. We've done so much with so little, and we're trying to keep it going, and we're trying to get to that point, and we've already gotten to a point where it's making the difference. We don't want to step back from this. This is stepping back. This is the priority issue that we created this center down at Longley for, and we got to keep it moving forward. And, you know, you just heard from Mary and the job that she does down there. There's a lot of work to be done on an operation like this. And 2 people, I mean, I'm happy you restored the 50,000, but you know, 2 people aren't going to do it. So I really want some further discussion if there's some ability to move some numbers and some of these other positions are moved back in, that 3rd position at the store next door. And that's another thing too, I really want to discuss. The 3rd position at the Longley Homeless Resource Center. Okay. There's been a lot of discussion about the store next door holding up its own bootstraps, that somehow the school department pays for an executive director. We don't pay our executive director. Nobody gets paid in the store next door. It's your building down there. It's your employees who work for the Lewiston School Department. It's your programming, educational initiative to keep these kids locked in. We are a paper organization that provides funding and resources to you in support of taking care of these kids. So to sit here and say that we need a plan where we take over that school function, educational function, building, no. When we created that 3 years ago, that wasn't the purpose. That wasn't where we were going. This is an educational piece, no different than any of the other schools that you have in your district. Now, stepping back to the budget, I really want to point out something over 3 years of working on this school budget. You know, Linda, you brought up the point that it's gone up 20 million over 4 years, 5 years, whatever. Yes, it did specifically. And we done that really hard because of the enormous amount of deficiencies that this school department had. ELL was not being taken care of. Special ed was not being taken care of. Alternative was not being taken care of. Homelessness was not being taken care of. We had deplorable numbers, graduation numbers. Nobody wanted to serve on the school committee. That's how I ended up jumping on. That's how bad it was. We did it purposely to get this district to where it needed to be. And that money that's being spent in this budget, every dollar is going to where it should be. Moving forward, what you all have to embrace is every year from here on in a district of $100 million budget, just your labor and your insurances are going to produce $1.5 million increase every year, barring the revenue pieces. I'm just saying what you can expect every year. The problem we have this year is, once again, our partners have reneged on us, both the federal and the state. Now, I get the federal, it was supposed to disappear. We all knew that money was going to disappear. The reality is it's gone. It's disappearing. And then to help us out even more, the state reduces their amount of money. So the question to the community is this: if we're going to maintain a school department at a certain level, when we have deficiencies from federal and state funding, is the community going to step up and fund this school department? And I say, oh yeah, $1.70. And the reason I support $1.70, and probably even a little more than that, is because we're a school department that's finally gotten to a point where we're operational, we're covering all of our bases, we're making progress. I'm certainly biased on the homeless, that we made an enormous amount of progress with these kids and across the board. And what the community, going to the city council, going to the community on the referendum vote, has to realize is when we come up deficient in our revenue funding, is the answer to lay off people, lay off teachers, cut programs, go backwards, move backwards? No. These are the times when the community needs to pull together and say, you know what, we got this year. Not to expect it every year, but next year, maybe the state gets it together and funds it the way it should be getting funded. And then there might be some other federal programs. We'll do our job at the store next door, shopping for those grants. Maybe we can pull something off. Maybe we can work in a more collaborative effort. I do still want that workshop about what we can do together, because I don't think it's clear with anybody about what our functions are down there. But keep in mind, these are your employees. So all of that, you know, I just want to put things in perspective, you know, of the cost of living. We hit 4.5% this year in cost of living. That has impacted all of your negotiations. There's no way to avoid that. I see it in every other department that I work with. You know, it's all the same. So that's all I want to say. Again, I want to I want to just thank you and for supporting the store next door. I think there's more work to be done. I really would like to see that last position. And to really, for all of you to have a different conversation with the city council, that you're in a different place now. This isn't a routine budget year. And every year you're going to have these expenses. You need a long-term plan of how you address with the city council a $1.5 million increase every year, barring whatever revenues are coming in. I also want, last thing, I do not support that revenue piece of taking 3 million out. It's dangerous. It screwed over Auburn when we did it. The problem is you're already at 5 million on your fund balance. If you have a bad year, all you need is that 1 year where your fund balance comes in at 2 million instead of 7 million. And all hell breaks loose. And it won't matter if you have a reserve fund or not. It's the idea that, if you take a look at your 20-year historical, and I think we did this in the budget committee, we only averaged 3.2 million in fund balance. These last few years have been an aberration. I mean, it's been odd with COVID and the federal funding and everything. So it's dangerous. And I recommend against that. 20 years of budgeting in these two cities, don't touch it. Just keep it the way it is. And just address the fact that this budget needs to pass as it is with the $1.70 and to fight for it with the council and explain to the community that when deficiencies happen, the community needs to step up. And you know what? From everything I've seen with the store next door, I think this community will step up. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak? Back to the committee.
I'd like to make a motion to direct the superintendent to request the budget, propose a budget that has a budget increase of $1.70 on the mill rate, and to maintain the basically the proposal under option 1.
Is there a second? Member Eames?
Predictably, I will second.
Any further discussion? Member Beauplant?
Thank you. I've been noticeably, even for myself, quiet on this issue. I've been sucking in all the back and forth that's gone on, the very pertinent arguments and points of view on both sides. I know there is no fat in the budget, and I know that this $1.70 is a big ask. I've always thought that it shouldn't be the school committee's job to think of taxes, although we all pay them. I certainly understand that. I don't think we're wanting things that we couldn't have. We need these things. And I've used my favorite quote before that of Genghis Khan, that only a fool would fight a battle he can't win. But then again, on this issue, nobody whispered it in his ear. If you don't succeed at first, try again. So I would like to give my support to the motion. Thank you.
Member Whitlow?
Yeah, so superintendent, when we talk about the ice and mud week, is this something, this is very important to me, and I want to know how, if we pass this $1.70, when do we talk about taking out ice and mud week or keeping it in, or having that discussion, and do we have to talk about that before we approve this?
I guess it's the committee's will. If you want to reduce it before you approve a budget, you can make that decision. If we wait for finals to happen and get input, it would be mid-June, I would imagine, before we'd have that information and referendums in May.
So we're able to talk about this after the budget.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And just to put a number out there, for ice and mud week, we estimated them to be each about $9,000. So it'd be 18,000. The rest
What-
was summer.
What was the 77,000 that we talked about before? Because I mean, it sounds like 9,000 isn't all that much money for like nutrition, you know, because we feed the kids, right? Are we doing all that?
So the nutrition program in the summer is a fully federally funded piece. So it costs money, but not locally in our budget. And I just had to pull it up too, and because I was with you earlier with that number. So the projected costs for summer school are 70,000, and for ice and mud week are 9,000 each. So in full, 88,000. So that's where we got the 7 from. Yeah.
Member Bowden?
Thank you. Before we vote on anything, I've asked for the last 2 meetings that we've had about administration costs, and if there's any cuts that you can make in there. Do you have anything to report to us about that?
So I've looked and thought and looked and thought, and I don't see additional administrative costs beyond well, we have the attrition piece with our SEL position, the resource position. And that would just be depending on who's hired and what that structure looks like. I don't have that reduction for you today specifically. I folded it into some other items potentially because I could see some savings there. But also that one assistant principal position is still reduced in this budget.
Thank you. I just have one more like clarifying question, I guess procedurally. If I wanted to make a motion for a different option in this budget, do I need to wait until after this motion is voted on? And if this motion passes, then I don't have the opportunity to make that motion?
So just a couple of things. I think part of what we have to, we want to come to tonight is an agreement on an amount, so that I can finish preparing the presentation for the city with the input that you have. The ultimate decision on how the funds are spent and on which items remain the committee's call. So if there's suggestions on different positions, things like that, it could impact this conversation, but it also could be discussed moving forward.
Okay, I'm just gonna put out there that I do not support the $1.70, and I will not be voting for that. And I would like to make a motion on a different number, but I suppose we'll move along with the vote.
Can I ask a clarifying question on something you just said about the attrition of the SEL position? That is not being removed from the budget?
No, so I don't have it as a cut item, but I do think that there's a potential for some savings when you hire or look at the way in which the position functions. So it could cost us less, it could function slightly differently. Anytime we have someone step away, it's an opportunity to look at what does that position do and how do we want to best use that resource for our district.
Thank you for clarifying that. Member Whitlow?
With the motion on the table of the $1.70, is that also with the 3 million fund balance in that motion?
So I did not include that in the motion because it wasn't stated, but I was going to ask immediately after if it's not. But I also would perceive this as not moving additional funding to the reserve, like that 800,000. I would perceive this as $1.70. And I was going to ask about the reserve after, unless someone wants to include it.
Member Damon, was your intention to be option number 1 and the 3?
Well, actually, I think that the option, I think the option 1 is the one that I can support. I don't, moving to the reserve fund, I'm not as crazy about that.
So option number 1, but not moving the 3 million to the reserve fund.
3 million.
Does anyone have any other questions or comments on the motion that's on the table? All in favor? One, 2, 3, 4, 5 opposed. 3, motion passes.
Did there want to be any conversation about reserve fund?
Member Damon. Sorry. Member Whitlow.
Yeah, I'm not liking the idea of having our fund balance as a reserve. I think that I guess if we have some awful thing happen and we need to tap into funds, then we just, what do we do? Like, do we
vote
go,
reallocate.
we have to go back and have another, something on the, I don't know, some vote somewhere. I don't know, I feel stupid here.
So my understanding of like fund balance is to spend it, you have to have it approved through referendum. And so if we have that emergent like situation, it could cause the need to actually engage in municipal process to have the city approve it and then also referendum.
Okay, that was actually what I was trying to say, but didn't get it out. But yeah, I know how much we use of our fund balance on a yearly basis, and dwindling it down to 2 million. I'm not crazy about that.
If it's during the same budget year, we can reallocate funds, correct?
With approved items, yes. So the fund balance wouldn't land as an approved fiscal item. That's the idea behind the reserve. It's an approved fiscal item, which then could be used per the school committee's discretion.
So just for a visual, if that $800,000 proposed adjustment were to pass tomorrow, and we had to come up with $800,000 tomorrow, could we use the current fund balance for that? Or would we have to reallocate unspent funds from this year, or how would that work?
You have to go with what's been approved by voters. So yes, we'd have to look for what things we could transfer within that have already been approved. And there are limitations on transfer from article to article by 5%.
Any other questions? Comments, Member Hurd?
So I have a question about, not about the option number 4, but about like next steps. So I don't know if that's here that I asked that, or wait until after we decide if we're gonna push it through, like the fund balance of 3 million.
So that there's been no motion to use fund balance to create a reserve. In the $1.70 though, the use of $5 million in fund balance exists on the revenue sheet. So there's already $5 million in play with that last vote.
Okay, so my question is not about the fund balance. My question is, so we are gonna go present to the city council, and the whole reason that we have a city council member on our committee is so they can kind of tell us like what a general consensus of what the city council is going to tell us, which she has already stated that they're probably not going to approve the 170. So what's our step going forward? Do we have to have them approve it, or do we say we want 170 and then we have to fund that from our fund balance? Like how does that work?
That's a good question. So the next step in this process, I'll go present the committee's wishes to the city council, and then they will make a decision. They can provide feedback. They can kind of send us back and say, we'd like you to do more of this. They can approve it as presented. There's a number of steps they can take. And I believe if I'm reading the charter correct, they can also choose to not pass it and not take action. And it could land in the hands of the city administrator, which is new this year. It's the first year that process exists. My understanding then is that the city administrator and I would communicate, but ultimately she would decide on a number that would move forward to referendum.
Anything else? Member Eames?
Clarifying question still. So you said that if we pass this, we have the 5 million, not reserve, fund balance to work with. But I thought it was already budgeted.
The $5 million
Yeah, so-
is part of revenue. It pays for
Yeah,
things already in the budget.
Exactly.
It's not usable.
Exactly.
in that
That's what I wanted to
sense.
clarify, because I
Yes.
feel like that was maybe potentially misunderstood by the public. So doing number 4, adding some things to reserve fund doesn't change anything other than how we can access it, right? Otherwise, it's similar.
Right, we wouldn't be creating items in the budget with reserve. We'd be
Right.
creating a reserve accessible by the committee should
In
budget
case.
things come up,
Right.
which is
And
very different.
So
from
we
the
have
fund
this
balance.
idea of the fund balance as if it's like that, but it really isn't. The fund balance is tied up in a way that this wouldn't be.
Correct. Fund balance needs due process to be accessible.
Right. Due process meaning referendum.
Correct.
Yeah. So this would be a vote of us, of the whoever's in the school committee at the time. Would
Yes,
be
if
how
there was
you
a-
spend the reserve.
Yes,
So if an emergency came up, we could quickly act on it. But the money is not going anywhere. It's sitting there. but
correct.
Much as the fund balance does right now. But this would be sitting there, but also more accessible in a more efficient way.
Yes, if approved at referendum. Yeah.
No, I mean the reserve. Yeah.
Yes, but it still has to be approved by referendum.
Oh, so that, wait a
So kind of the
second, say
time
that
is
again?
now. So the reserve still has
Oh,
to be
to create it,
approved.
but I mean, once it
Correct.
was created.
Once it's created, the school
the-
committee
the
would have
money
the
is still
authority.
there, but the way to access it would be different.
Yes,
Okay, that's what I'm trying to establish, right? So it's not using it, it's just putting it in a different place and making it accessible in a more efficient way.
yeah, a bad
Maybe I'm
example is,
misunderstanding it.
no, you're right. I think a bad example is think of like a CD account. If you give someone your money in a CD account and you can't touch it for a couple of years without certain steps, that's what fund balance is. But if you create a reserve, it's in your bank account and it's accessible. Correct.
Counselor Scott.
So I wanted to bring something else up as well. I think it's unfortunate that Mrs. Hall left because we did not get to discuss any of this. And I wanted to thank her and tell her that I'm definitely going to take the opportunity to go through all of this and read this and just to appreciate what she had done. And I just want to put that out there publicly.
Member Eames.
So I guess I don't understand the hesitation to do number 4. So can someone speak to that? Seems like there's hesitation. Nobody put it forward as a motion. There's concern, there's worry. I don't know what it is, so
So
maybe you can clarify.
I could be wrong, but in the way I'm looking at it is if we didn't have enough money in our budget and something happened, maybe city council would be like, I guess we need to give them more money in future budgets instead of having them have to use their fund balance for these things. And so I would want it to have to go in referendum because the city has to be involved. If that's my opinion, I have no idea if that's the right way to look at it or not.
Member Bowden.
No, so the way that I understood it is this money, we're using 5 million of it already in our budget, which means we need to have that next year in our budget, which means we have to have it the year after in our budget.
But it would be there. It's not gone.
No, but pulling more out, right? It just seems like a slippery slope to keep sticking your hands in that. I just feel like, I mean, there has to be some like fiscal responsibility here with that. Like it needs to be left alone, I think.
I think the slippery slope is the temptation of saying, oh, we can just do that because we have reserve. I would not advise that way. I think you all know me better than that, especially the way we've generated fund balance and by being responsible and not just spending. But I think that's the slippery slope, Member Bowden, that you're mentioning is if it is accessible, it is the power of this committee to use it for things. And it correct. It could be others. But I would also think that people would be mindful. I don't have as much reservation about, I didn't mean that as a pun, about a reserve. I think the leaner this budget gets, the more concerned I am about an overage. And I think that that's an important topic. These kinds of budget cycles, let's say they do approve a change and it's $800,000 and these budget items are what they are. You're talking, I'm freezing budgets in October and I'm telling people no more paper, no more pens, no more. If that position's not hired yet, I want to know a lot about it before we post it. It's that kind of freeze because we have impending costs. And so, but I don't want to just have a reserve to just dive into that. We might still freeze if we have a reserve, but it could be a conversation that continues.
Member Eames.
Also, it doesn't have to be 3 million. That was a number you chose, but it could be 1.
Right. It could be It could be one, could be 500,000, could be lots of things.
Yeah.
I chose 3 million on purpose as an item that would allow us to, if we were low this year on carryover, but we didn't touch it, it would be that 5. And if we don't need it, it can sit in the reserve. And so again, this is that insulation for 2, 3, 4 years out.
So then is what we'd be voting on was not every year we put 3 million, but this year we put 1 or 3 or whatever we decide, and then next year someone else decide, the next committee decides on a number that year. Not that it's the same every year.
Right, yeah, it would just be a one-time thing, or it could be an annual thing. Some districts do it annually to maintain a certain threshold. I think one of the superintendents I talked to, they have a $8 or $10 million reserve and they monitor it. So if it's down, they add to it. And if they've got to go into it, they put it back. But then they always have that. Again, $100 million organization, we have no reserve. We have freeze, unfilled positions, those kinds of things.
So what did somebody who was testifying at the podium mentioned Auburn having a crisis somehow tied to a reserve? I don't know if that was what they meant to say. Did I hear it right? And is that true?
I don't know if Mr. Poffin wants to talk more about it. I think they spent some of their reserve and they got in trouble with fund balance usage long-term.
It's a slippery slope that's been spoken of. It started out as a few $1 million each year to take out of the fund balance. And what happened is it turned into, we will continue to use the fund balance to always maintain the tax rate, so there's never any tax increase. So it was a very arbitrary tax increase. And then the reserve account was created. And of course, it's much easier to access than the fund balance. And therefore, it was like all these things we've talked about on paper, the temptation is there, well, wait, we'll use our reserve account. And if you follow the municipal governments in the area, they are always using their reserve account to fund their budgets. And you guys might be strong. The problem is when you all leave and someone new occupies your seats, then what happens there? And they have that temptation to spend it all. And so it was a course of 6 to 8 years of increase fund balance and reserve. And we cleaned it out, almost bankrupt the city. So it was like it went zero and they had to reorganize all the finances to get it back to where it was. And I was a city councilor at the time and also on the finance committee. So I was very, I was right in the thick of it all and I recommended against that. And, quite frankly, that's the reason the city manager isn't there anymore. So, it had wide ranging effects. So that it's just a temptation that's thrown out there. And when times get tough, you lean on that. And if you can police yourself, you can try it. But other than that, I wouldn't recommend it.
Member Whitlow?
Is there a maximum amount that we can have in our fund balance?
I believe as long as it's voter approved, I don't know of a cap. There would be things that I think conversationally become uncomfortable, so why do you have such a big fund balance? Reserve, like what are you doing with that? As it relates to fund balances, yes, there is a cap. And that is dwindling. Sorry, I picked up like half my answer there. Yes, there is a limitation as to how much fund balance you can carry. Right now, it's 9% of your budget. And then as I was saying earlier, typically it's 4%. So the state has proposed that this year it's 9. And then I think 2 years out, it's going to go to 6. And then 2 years out, 4. So they're trying to tier it out. Don't quote me on the years, but they know that people have fund balance because of the COVID effects. And they're trying to tier that out. But again, I still think the risk with that as you tier that out is you won't be allowed to have fund balance in our organization, for example, bigger than 4. This year, we're spending 5.
We've always spent around 5, haven't we? And we did 7 a few years ago. I feel like I remember there was a lot of controversy because it was like a $9,000, $9 million when Bobby was here, something came out and it was all over the news. So like there was, it was before COVID. So our fund balance was a little higher than normal. And so you're right, there was, why do you have so much money in there? And so, I mean, right now we're allowed to have about 9 million in our fund balance, right? Is that approximately, because our budget's around 100,000. So at some point, 100 million, my God. So in, you know, in 4 years or whatever you said, like we might only be allowed to have like 4 million, but our budget will probably go up, maybe, I don't know. Probably not, because we won't be able to use as much fund balance because that comes in handy. So when we say like a few years ago, we asked for 80 million, probably because we used about close to 10 million in fund balance at that, probably that time frame. So that's why I'm just kind of thinking maybe that's part of why it was so low back then. And I don't know, I'm just trying to think about why we do things.
It's also important to remember that any fund balance we have is money that taxpayers have paid for the purpose of supporting our schools and being spent on our schools. And we're just sort of sitting on that money that taxpayers have said we want to go to fund a school budget. So we should spend it. We need to keep some for emergency situations, but we've got to balance that. They've already told us they want us to spend that on education. So we should be spending that on education.
Yeah, just one other add, in the last 2 years, if this budget moves like it is, it's at 61 positions reduced. Last year, we lost about 17, I think, if I remember correctly. So that's 78 positions of not fund balance next year. That in the past, when we didn't fill those and we had all these positions in the budget that we've cleaned up, that's what created the fund balance. So my thinking with the reserve is that fund balance piece with the 78 positions, that's a lot of salary and benefits cost that was otherwise in our budget that we have reduced.
If we were to vote to support putting the money in the reserve, would that be a separate question on the referendum, or would it just be all lumped into the same question?
It would be a separate question, that's my understanding.
Anything else? Are you good with everything? All right. We will move on to agenda item number 11, which is report from school committee chair, and I have nothing to report tonight. Agenda item number 12, report from the superintendent.
I'm sure I have lots of things, but in the name of time, I know we have some other items. I'll be brief. We do have Chris Herron visiting us on Thursday. That's the guest speaker, was a former Celtic who was challenged by substance use. And it destroyed his professional basketball career. And he's coming to speak to our high school. Should be a pretty engaging event. We have some wraparound supports built into it. And then we have some follow-up community conversations that will continue around just making people aware of the substance use, well-being of kids, particularly at the high school level, in and around this event.
Member Whitlow?
Would we be able to be invited to that? I would love to. I think I have some opportunity. I'd really like to be a part of that and observe.
Yes, absolutely. I'll get you a time. I was told today that the time frame shifted a little bit on his schedule, but I can get that to you.
Did you have your hand up, Member Bopolant? Okay. Agenda item number 13, report from city council rep.
I'm just going to report tonight that we do have a meeting tomorrow. We'll have a regular agenda. We'll also be discussing for the budget, general government. We'll have our first budget public hearing and protective inspections. And then we also have a meeting on Thursday, budget only, which is nonprofit requests, miscellaneous municipal revenues, and general discussion.
Thank you. Report from student reps. They're not here this evening. Updates from school committee subcommittees. Member Bopolant.
Thank you. On curriculum, Member Eames and myself had the pleasure on Tuesday, March 28th, to take up an invitation by 2 fourth grade teachers here at Connors, Kennedy Raymond and Evelyn Atwood. There were 2 very interesting classes of 4th graders, and I did learn it's possible to herd kittens. I don't know how they did it, but when you teach elementary, it's clear you have to chunk things in little tiny pieces. So you would look at their lesson plan, it probably would have been terribly long. It was an engaging classroom, as I had gone on record earlier saying when you walk in the door, you want it warm, you want it welcoming, you want it colorful. I was blown away by the technology use in an American history social studies lesson. It was like a meteorologist touching the whiteboard and all these wonderful things happened. Elizabeth, what have I forgotten?
Thank you. You haven't forgotten anything. It was a very good impression that we got from that jointly run classroom. They weren't always joint, but they moved in and out of the two rooms that were connected. And I thought it was really instructive. I would encourage us all to go to a classroom, spend some hours in a classroom if you have the chance. And the other thing we did for curriculum today was all day, once a month. This year, it's math curriculum that they're revising. And so we spent all day today revising, planning on the revisions for the 24-25 school year. So they think well ahead. Thank you.
What impressed me on that is that it's not top-down management. Here's how we're going to do it. It was collegial, it was collective, it was options. It was, again, the goal of meeting standards, but it wasn't pounding a square peg into a round hole. We debated issues of calculus as opposed to data science. For a non-math person, it was what I understood, I enjoyed. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other member items?
As for the policy committee, since we passed what we passed in the consent agenda today, I think we're caught up in what we've been revising and what you've seen. But obviously, going forward, we have more work to do.
Thank you. Any other subcommittee updates? Nope. Agenda item number 16, school committee community announcements. Member Damon.
And I know Linda is well aware of this, but there is a program, I think is it the 10th, Linda, the food rescue program? Yeah, it's on the 10th. Yeah, it's a program really about, trying to reduce food waste and recycling and all kinds of really interesting stuff as far as
I'm taking the seminar. I signed up for that webinar, so I'll be taking it to get more information so that we can bring that forward.
Yeah.
And it's not just the schools that are looking at that. There are several different organizations. Yeah, St. Mary's and Nutrition Center. There's all sorts of different places that are part of that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, we should encourage the district to, if it's at all possible, to participate in that. So I think it's a very worthwhile project.
Healthy Androscoggin is hosting a drug take back day on April 22nd from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Lewiston High School and at Bedard's Pharmacy in Auburn. So any prescription meds, anything that you don't want in your home, you can bring and they will dispose of it appropriately. The 22nd, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Item number 17, future agenda items. Member Willows?
Thank you. Ice and Mud Week.
Okay. Agenda item number 18 through 26 are entering into executive session to discuss a student discipline hearing, Title 20A 1019 and Title 4056B. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second.